All right, here we are back again. I think it's been about 4 months now since the last episode we
Mhm.
recorded. This time I've decided I'm not going to hold back, and you might think, hold back? How have you been holding back? That as an interviewer, I feel like I need to facilitate a good conversation, a discussion in which the guest that I have on the podcast is able to open up and share what they need to share without any hindrance or impediment for myself. I feel like I have things I need to say today that just need to be said and expressed, spoken out loud. And so I challenge anyone, like not in a uh, confrontational way, I guess, in an explorational way. If anyone listening, normally people will open a video, watch it for the first maybe 10 seconds or up to a minute and decide if they want to continue. I want to challenge anyone listening that if you remain and watch most of, if not all the podcast today, that you will leave in awe with a sense of wonder and excitement of the gospel, of God and of life, wanting to know more and explore, intellectually explore the possibilities that are out there that you maybe were not aware of before. So here is Jordan. We've done a podcast before together, and we've spent a lot of time in the last several months learning from each other, discussing, and even sometimes debating or fighting with love, fighting with words about the gospel. So I'm right now in my presenter or interviewer mode, and I want to go into my Christian Alfaro mode of being, where I'm just going to be who the flesh I am, right? And me and Jordan are going to have a conversation like we normally do. But Jordan, you don't have to introduce yourself because if anyone wants to know who you are, they can go to the last episode and watch that. But can you start just by telling us? This will be my interviewer question to start out. Can you tell us what has it been like in the last several months as we've gotten to know each other? What experiences have we had? What can you recollect, or what has been overall, what has been the experience getting to know me, myself, and I'll talk about as well, what it's been like. And you can go first, though.
Well, I think we had a lot of similarities, which allowed our conversations to flourish and yield fruit. So that just blessing of that common ground, just both of us being compassionate about truth, also pretty transparent, and really wanting to reason together to discover the truth and being passionate and having integrity about our own beliefs and positions, but at the same time, having that mutual respect for each other in the Lord allowed us to, I think, hear one another. And that has continued to develop over time or yield more wisdom and truth through that bond. I've been able to learn truths because of the trust, a deep spiritual trust that I haven't necessarily experienced with anyone else at a personal level.
Awesome. Yeah, I would say I believe at this point in time that um, both you and I, Jordan, have been prepared by God, our Father in heaven, to be in each other's lives at this point in time, to meet each other and to be able to express certain things where I've revealed to you certain things that you needed to know, and you've also revealed to me certain things or helped me to understand things that I didn't understand previously. These are ways in which like everybody should be interacting the way that we discuss, have conversation. I believe everyone needs to find somebody they can talk to so that they can express their ideas, get the thoughts out of them that they've had and they've held on to for so long, things that they've never said out loud. Those are things that everyone needs to be able to. Everyone should be allowed to experience by having a relationship with somebody they trust. Ultimately, our relationship of trust should be built on God, but sometimes you don't feel that you can go to God. You don't feel that you can relate to Him. So you need somebody else to help open up your eyes
Okay.
until you feel confident enough that you can go to God. Sometimes that's how it is. Sometimes people will go to God first, but sometimes people need somebody to take them to God, to go
Yeah,
with them.
that's
So
right.
yeah.
I think that's necessary, and I think that's why, often Christians have said that God manifests his miracles or his answers to prayers through messengers, through angels, through mortals, through you, through me, through our neighbor. And that's probably right, more than it is wrong. So I think that speaks to that truth.
Yeah.
Um, And I just want to say, we could give reason to why our churches, um, from an observation for years of worship in my community and abroad, I've seen a almost in a sense that the communities, the churches have been politicized and bipolarized, is what I mean. That any disagreements or misgivings are subverted or shunned implicitly in our meeting houses and in our quorums. And that needs to end. And I think our exchanges and what we're trying to say and what we've said at the outset of this dialogue is that you need to, and I hope that this video inspires others, and that it can be done well, and that it's possible. And if just our sharing of our shared experiences don't, that hopefully some of my opinions here will compel others to repent and to begin to share. And I will change hitherto my personal response, my personal repertoire with the saints, with believers. It will be more direct and challenging from now on.
I think like a thought I've had is that a lot of the things that we've discussed have brought both of us closer to God, but ironically, a lot of these things we've discussed, if you said them in church, in a church setting, you might get talked to by somebody, a teacher or a leader, a bishop, and they would ask you to not say those things out loud or to not talk about them openly. For example, I used to teach Sunday school. I have multiple examples where I was cautioned to avoid certain things that were not bad things, but they were deemed to be truths that were too much for people to handle. Or, yeah, so one time in Sunday school, I was teaching and I brought up the question, why do we think that people are leaving the church? What are the reasons behind it and what can we do about it? And we had a great discussion about it. A lot of people that normally didn't participate opened up and shared because everyone has experience with this, either having the thought that they want to leave church or noticing people that they know, family and friends leaving the church. And if this is the place where God needs us to be, why would people leave? That's a great question to ask because obviously the church is not perfect. Apparently, because if it was perfect, then nobody would have a reasonable excuse. But anyways, the bishop at the time, he called me into his office later that week and he asked me to not talk about that openly or not to stray from what the lesson is supposed to be about. But what does a lesson matter if 50% of the people that are supposed to be in that class are not there to hear it, right? So I think that's a fundamental issue that's crucial for our time in the church. Another thing, I'll be open about this up front, is that in the last months, I've had experiences with demonic spirits, encounters with evil that have really shaken me, that have tested my relationship with God, my trust in Him. And when I went to my bishop about it, he was understanding and all that, but he actually asked me not to speak about this. Not to not speak about it at all, but I was also in a different ward teaching Sunday school as well. He asked me not to mention this in the lessons that I teach, which I think is critical that not that I share my experience personally, but that we understand about spiritual warfare and the fact that this is an ongoing battle that started before this life even began. In heaven, Lucifer rebelled against our Father, and there was a war fought in heaven, and that war continues. And that war is by God's allowance because it allows us to experience evil. So that way, when we know evil and we know good, we get to choose which one we want to abide in, which spirit we love more, the spirit of good or the spirit of darkness. So, all that being said, me and Jordan have discussed things that have felt so correct, wholesome, and pure. Not all the time. We're not always talking in perfect alliance or alignment and harmony with the spirit. But when we do, there are things said that I'm fairly confident we wouldn't talk about in church, which is ironic, seeing as how the church is the place for us to talk about God. So yeah. What
Thank you.
thoughts did that spark, Jordan?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. I hope that this message inspires the saints, inspires Christians across the world, or those who see it. So yes, we all have different experiences, and I we're gonna have to edit this out, Fetch. I'm losing my thoughts. I need to get back on track. Hold on a
By the
second.
way, so Jordan is doing his best to present his thoughts carefully in a positive way that can be palatable. Jordan is actually hilarious, and he makes lots of very intelligent, highly intelligent jokes and remarks. And just by associating with Jordan, I'm using advanced vocabulary as well to express my humor. So most people that know me know I don't talk like this all the time, but it's an effort I'm making to be able to reach different audiences. But anyways, Jordan is pretty fetching hilarious. I would say pretty freaking funny. So
Yeah,
we'll let that roll.
yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. I was, yeah, talking about that earlier. So I want to say, as a member of the church, I do believe that there is a role that the Judge of Israel plays in our lives. And I'm not saying I know what that is better than any other member. I'm speaking to
And the Judge of Israel being who?
the bishop.
Bishop. Okay.
That's his title. And so he does play a role, or have a role, or some authorities or stewardship over you, even if he's wrong, even if it's misused. That's still a capacity that he's been given by the Lord. So that I don't think can be ignored. But I think, based on what you've told me, and now I don't know the reasons your bishop had said that, maybe it should have been explained in those two examples that you shared. But it's clear to me that the conversations that we're trying to facilitate is not wrong. In that first example, and in the latter example, that's also not inherently wrong. And so I don't know why you had received that counsel. Maybe we're missing something. I will say, and I share a testimony with you, that the enemy of our soul is a real personage of spirit sought on destroying you. And if it's even if we even flirt with the idea that that's not a reality, that needs to shake us to our core and be cast out. The thought that these things aren't real or don't happen. And I think that conversation, the place for that conversation, not out of superstition or stigmatization, needs its place in Christian life, in religious life. That there's an enemy to our soul, and that any subversion of such speech may only serve to strengthen the enemy and keep him in the darkness when he needs to be brought to the light.
Yes.
Surrounding mental illness and its cause, those claims are all philosophical. They're not merely scientific. So there is a legitimate place for dialogue for the enemy to our soul, not only scripturally or doctrinally, but actually. And so it would be irresponsible, especially as believers, to not allow that to take place.
Yes.
So I wanted to respond to your statement.
Yeah. So just like how we see that there's war going on currently, if you in your homeland, wherever you're living at, if you were to all of a sudden be attacked physically, not spiritually like the devil does, but physically, seeing like homes getting destroyed, houses blown up, and all this widespread chaos and destruction, would you not want to know where your enemy, not only where they're at, but where they could go, how they potentially they could attack, to prepare yourself? It's this ignorance, and I say ignorance, not ignorance. It's this ignorance of the reality of warfare that we convince ourselves we don't need to know these things about the enemy. I've had the comment said to me multiple times, as I've repeatedly I've expressed this to people when I feel I need to do so by the Spirit telling me. I tell people about my experiences with the devil, and they tell me that I shouldn't. If you focus on those things, it gives the devil power. That's, I think, something that the devil would want us to think in order to avoid, like you said, his works of darkness coming to the light. One thing that's important to recognize, I learned this, is that the word occult, which is the occult is referring to devil worship in general, the dark arts, magic, whatever you want to call them, the devilish practices. The occult is based on keeping things from the light, keeping truth from the light. Anything that is evil, keeping it from being discovered. By operating in darkness is how the devil gains his power, and manipulates us through with our lack of knowing. So if we know who God is, yeah, go ahead.
Another way of saying that is we need to break through norms that are no longer working for us, for the church, for believers as Christians. And that's part of what's happening. And that happens historically, and that happens through time. And it may need to happen again. But I think that's you know, a wisdom or a principle that can be applied to understand this. And so another way of saying that, you know, is that it is my belief that misteachings or false doctrines or heresies are maintained or produced implicitly. Implicity is nonverbal. And so it becomes, and that can even become a way of speaking, like people speaking to you like, oh, don't talk about these things, that. And so it becomes an implicit bias, psychological bias, where when the thoughts then walk that boundary, it then it stops us from going further. The truth allows the truth to think itself or to come out without limitation.
Yes.
And that implicity does not allow the conversation to have where then truth can have its place. Or that's another way of saying bringing the darkness to the light.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these cultural norms must end, or change must come. The world is changing now. We see some prophecies getting fulfilled with what's going on in Israel. We see the world changing, and the political climate surrounding Israel and support or antagonism towards Israel is going to change through this conflict. So sooner or later, things are getting closer. We've got another series of patterns of prophecy that are happening again that are getting us on that path.
Yeah.
And so some things need to change and some more challenges need to be done. I feel that in some capacities, I've been maybe raised up to be that maybe unpopular voice or something, to do that, and that I should no longer fear men, and that I can be labeled whatever an individual wants to label me as. But as our own prophet has said, he's been very clear to the youth that labels, he doesn't say labels are not important or helpful, but he does caution us that labels, the most important label is child of God. And so any label to any individual, whether that be a mental illness, you know, say a diagnostic term, so-called diagnostic term from the DSM, or a racial label, or some other sort of demographic or economic label, that all of these fall short of the true identity as child of God. So any labels that may be attributed me, let them fall. Let them prove themselves. For the word of God will, you know, come out and be true. And I'll put myself at that risk if it makes me unpopular. Anyway, so I don't know if I'm being very clear there, but
Well, I wanted to clarify one thing you said, just for anybody listening, because you said something very true that I've also thought, is that truth allows for more truth, And so if you can picture like from left to right there being like a source, an original thought that leads to other thoughts, like a flowing, like a flow chart, and there's arrows pointing in the direction of where that is flowing, a thought leading to more thought, which leads to more thought. If anything cuts that off, then that's not, I don't believe that that's from God. I believe it's like it could be through a social construct, like you said, something that people just refuse to talk about, and implicitly or like in an implied way, because people don't talk about it, you assume that it's not supposed to be talked about ever at all.
Yeah.
Just because people do something doesn't mean that it's correct. But when God is involved, I've learned that God's thought is infinite. The thoughts of God, the mind of God is eternally expansive. So if one thought leads to another thought, which leads to another thought, that means you're on the right track. If there's a thought that kind of puts a cap on something, like a dome over the top where it doesn't grow up anymore, it doesn't come from God, most likely. Something that just an answer that is definitive and cuts off other thoughts is not something that represents the mind of God, in my experience. And
Yeah.
if anyone wants to see an example of this, I would encourage everyone to go watch. It's the pinned video on my YouTube. It's about the fall of Adam and Eve, or you can just go to the playlist that says podcast or the podcast to end the podcast. Go to that playlist, look at the video of the fall of Adam and Eve. You'll see what it looks like when thoughts lead to other thoughts, as an example. But yeah, Jordan, go ahead. I almost said
Yeah,
Gordy.
because if we're wrong, if either of us are wrong, then we are. It's one of my favorite scriptures. It's a great opportunity to teach a principle. In Revelations, we have one of my favorite scriptures says, I know he's John the Revelator speaking to the church of God. He says, I know thee and thou works that thou art neither hot nor cold, but because thou art lukewarm, I shall spew thee from my mouth or out of my mouth. What a wonderful and deep principle. So going back to this being implicit, and that's how false doctrines or limitations can creep in that don't allow the truth to come forward. A lot of people, either secularly or even within the faith, want to take a position of comfort. Let's say with the LGBTQ community, or whatever controversy surround that, or whatever controversy surrounds same-sex marriage. It goes on and on and on. Whatever controversy surrounds that, some people want to speak politically expediently, which means that they're speaking lukewarm to not take a position to offend one side or the other. So they're being cold peacekeepers. Martin Luther King said he was accused of having inflammatory rhetoric during the civil rights movements, that he was inciting violence with his rhetoric. His response was, the violence and racism was already there. I'm just bringing it to the surface so that it can be dealt with. So he was being hot or cold. He was no longer being lukewarm. He was allowing the conflict to come to itself. President or Elder Renlund has talked during COVID. He said this is a spiritual stress test. He talks about how the heart, it will unveil weakness. Hot or cold, the Lord will spew you out of his mouth if you're lukewarm. What we're doing is trying to be hot or cold. A lot of the world and what we're speaking of, people, the complacency, they have been, that time our prophets have said is coming to an end, to where people can be complacent or not choose one side or the other. What's happening in Israel and the violence against Jews, the worst that we've seen in the Holocaust, the murdering of babies, and the killing of innocent, just violations of human rights, I don't think that's a position where we can stay lukewarm. We need to be hot or cold. And that hot or cold means that the Lord can then either teach us by condemning us or blessing us for being righteous. We have to start to act. This is the change I want to bring to the world and that I see. And that's really important. And it's a really important principle. And for my life, I think I've been lukewarm for a really long time. And we're all imperfect and we have our own ways of being lukewarm. But I think that that's a really prudent principle and a deep principle to apply to what we're trying to communicate in this dialogue.
Yeah, I would add to that concept of being lukewarm. I think one of the causes, if not the main cause, is fear. Because I'm sure as soon as you mentioned LGBTQ, that somebody listening might have felt a slight twinge of something of
Sure.
either a curiosity of wanting to know what you're going to say about it, or waiting to condemn you for saying something wrong about it.
Right.
But or somebody might be afraid of what might be said as soon as that topic is mentioned. The fear is in the lack of either lack of understanding or lack of trust of not knowing what will happen if this is talked about. When you understand that God is good and God is a provider and a protector, it means that even if we go into dangerous territory, dangerous waters, either physically or in dialogue or spiritually and whatever, when we broach on a topic, God is present and his grace is available in abundance. So what this means is that even if we go somewhere where we're not supposed to go, God can bring us back. God can save us.
Yeah.
God can protect us. If you're like the idea that, for example, in the church, we believe like temples are a holy place of worship where we can become close to God by frequently visiting and being in the calm presence of other worshipers. But what about a soldier in the battlefield? Does he not have equally have the right and to access the Spirit of God and His peace? If not, does that soldier not have more access or a greater need for peace in God? So, as far as like the lukewarm feeling or the state of being of lukewarm, people are not acknowledging that God can protect us, He can save us. Even if we decide to act on something and go in the wrong direction, God can bring us back and He can save us. An idea, a concept, you did not make it this far without God allowing it to happen. And so if you are questioning your position, you're questioning whether you're going in the right direction, God had to allow you to get this far, wherever you're at. And so there's a reason behind it, or there are reasons to come that will manifest, reasons why you're still here. God, if it was not right, and if God did not want you to make it this far in whatever you're doing, then He would have redirected you or stopped you a long time ago, or even immediately. But the fact that He's let you continue is because you're on a path of growth, a path of learning, and that's what God wants is for us to become better, more developed, well-developed individuals.
Yeah, there maybe a slight digression, but there
No
is
worries.
yeah, there is hopefully if this is popular at all, if not, that's fine, because it's good for us. But in the future, there is a misconception, and I see it among believers and disbelievers probably more or less equally, or just as zealously or passionately. And that's something I think I want us to speak to sometime is this disdain of what I've called the penultimate stage to conversion. I have a friend who's doing analysis for disaffected religionists, so those who lose their faith and leave their church. He's doing right now graduate work on the greatest data analysis of why youth leaves their faith. And he had me analyze some of that data. And it's because they see what they call hypocrisy, but what they see is members or people not living what they should in their organization. So they leave, whether that be on kindness, on Christianity, whatever it is. So they leave. And so penultimate means the second to last. So what I mean is it's a bitter cup to drink because that'll always be there. But that's sort of like belonging to an institution or club. And everybody wants to because they want community. But in every community, you might find those who are struggling, just like you. Conversion is a private and personal thing. I hope our conversations in the future will facilitate something like this so that others can be helped and understand. So that was just something I felt inspired to touch on.
Yeah. Another thing to add is that I think I finally found the angle that makes me look the best. I think I've been moving the camera around so much the whole conversation fetch.
Yeah,
And I keep looking at myself wondering like, is this all right? But the fact that I took me this long, I think next video I'll do a much better job. But this looks, I think to me looks the best right here.
Yeah, I think I everybody has said I'm intense. People, I think I probably do look intense, but it's just as intense as I might be. My humor is just as intense, which is wonderful. But I completely minimize the self shot so that I'm not distracted by myself. But now I just
Oh,
turned it on, and I'm actually quite happy with what I see. So
That's
I think I'm handsome and probably better looking in person. So, you know, anyways, that's what I'm thinking.
I don't know how to do that on here, but
You
I'm
should
wondering because
leave this in there. I think it'll
yes,
be good for
I
people.
don't know how to edit anything, so
Yeah, you
it'll
should
be all
say
right.
hide self view. And then you cannot see
Oh,
yourself, but
fetch,
it's your call.
hide. So if I do that, I'm screen recording. I don't know if it'll remove me from. I don't know. I don't even know how that works.
Yeah, then don't
Um,
worry about it. You're also, yeah, you look
that's
great. It's fine.
It's also the way I'm sitting, I'm like with my knees drawn up a little bit with my arms across my legs. That way I'm more stable because I've been shaking the camera and moving it the whole time
Yeah.
because I've been floating without support on my arm. But anyways,
So, Christian, you
um
use this analogy of a soldier, and our audience may not have known that I am one, and I'm deployed to Afghanistan. You could
mhm,
have just asked me instead of using the analogy. So,
that's
what?
I thought about like wow, I wonder
Yeah,
what
yeah,
I actually had the thought, I wonder if what Jordan felt as he was over there in Afghanistan fetch.
Fetch. Okay.
Yeah. What did you feel and how did you feel connected to God in the midst of battle?
It wasn't, well, again, I wasn't an infantryman, but I did experience,
You were nearby. You were
yes, I did experience battle. I didn't use my weapon, but I was almost killed by a rocket attack. So I did experience combat. Um, but I prayed every day. I read the scriptures every day. It was almost like every day. And a lot of those feelings were processed when I came home or when I was in Kuwait and I was out of the battle zone. My body, and emotions finally settled down. And it's really the processing came later. In the moment, it's more survival. And but I did pray, and I always thought about the Lord um, when I was over there, and I
yeah.
was watching closely the political situation at the time.
Yeah. And we have 6 minutes left, by the way. I was gonna say in the midst of my trial where I went through, I was actually experiencing paranoia at a certain point where the devil had cursed me with this the spirit of paranoia in which I had thoughts that I felt were completely real that were not real. Um and coming out of it, I realized that well like the whole time, so this experience, there was like culminating moment in which I had been attacked by evil spirits for a while, and Jordan is actually a witness to one such event where we both felt attacked by evil spirits and we rebuked them in the name of Jesus. But it culminated in which somebody actually did witchcraft on me, a person that the devil had sent. And in the middle of this trial, I recognized my complete and utter dependency on God, which I already knew in principle and theory. In my mind, I was like, yeah, I already know that I'm dependent on God. But I experienced it in reality. I knew that I couldn't withstand this attack unless I turned to God. And so it made me run to God. And that's the last thing the devil wants is when you're going through a trial is for you to turn to God. He wants you to actually either fear God or blame God or just forget that God is there and suffer in solitude. But it made me turn to God more than I've ever turned to him before with an utter dependency, as in 0% chance of or hope of surviving this if I didn't turn to God. So I think yeah, in a way where whether you're being a soldier or whether like I felt in that moment I was a spiritual soldier for God being attacked
Yes.
by the enemy. If you feel this is something that's important, if you feel as if you have not experienced this darkness before, it's for there's multiple reasons possible, but I think namely the first two reasons is A, that God has not allowed you to go through this yet because you're not ready for it. Um, B, the devil does not see you as a threat to his works of darkness, or a combination of both. If you feel as if you haven't experienced this darkness, it's not because of you're not more righteous, but you're also not less righteous. It's more how prepared are you to deal with this? Would you turn to God in the middle of that? Are you would you be hurt beyond repair? Like those are I don't know if that makes sense. Those are things that I would consider like why did I go through this? The answer is because God prepared me for it and I learned things in months leading up to this trial. God had been preparing me for this experience so that when it happened, there's a phrase I've heard is that in a high stress level, in the high stress situation, you revert to your highest level of training. Um, and I feel like
Yeah,
God had been preparing me for this, and that
it's
at the
true.
moment of the attack,
I want
yeah,
to speak to that truth. I've
yeah,
experienced
you
that
have
with
3 minutes. Go
guys.
ahead. So take all the time. No worries.
I want to, just like, you kind of supported me and echoed something, I want to do the same. It's really important. So when you've talked about your experiences with the supernatural, same thing, just like the LGBTQ is like what is it called? Something like that is like a spark word or something. People all of a sudden tune in, they
A
want,
trigger.
yeah, a trigger word. So like people immediately could start labeling you as schizophrenic or blah blah blah, or all these things of mental illness, or he's crazy, I feel uncomfortable, I don't want to talk to him, blah blah blah. Um, all of that could happen just as much as me with the label production when I was talking about LGBTQ, even though I didn't really say anything. So that when that happens, um, we're gonna have to edit some of this out. I need to return, getting fearful. Um, dang it, our time. I'm gonna get it in. Don't worry, don't worry. So you were talking about,
2 minutes.
mental illness. Yeah, okay. Um, so talking about that, like struggling with mental illness, immediately people would shun you maybe, or they don't want you to be able to speak about this. I want to say that in the early church, the saints spoke about this. The saints
They
spoke
did.
about this commonly. It was common, and there was no fear of, it's a modern encroachment that this language has been stigmatized, because now the resolution of these phenomenons lie in psychiatry and psychology, etc., which are philosophical. Okay, and that means that they're not proven, de facto scientific.
Theoretical,
That's right.
almost. Yeah.
So we need to obliterate that. We need to get rid of some stigmatization. Where there is malingering or where there is falseness, etc., let it come out. Let's be hot or cold and let it have its day.
Let's figure it out. Let's hash it out. Yeah.
Exactly, together. But stop eschewing and stop shunning. Let the conversation yield itself. And the same thing with what you've brought up, or what somebody might pass judgment on you or think, or the label production that our prophet has spoken against. It's really important to have those conversations, again, because of a real enemy. I think it was Heber J. Grant, or a prophet in our church, had a vision of the spirit world.
Yeah.
And
Joseph F. Smith
I'm not sure, there's been a couple, but it was
yeah,
in
I was gonna say one of them is,
England.
yeah.
What? Why can't, why aren't we, do I have to say anything?
It's real, it's there, it exists.
Yeah, exactly. So stop it. Just like President Uchtdorf on bullying, what we're
Yeah.
saying, stop it.
2 words. Stop it. Yeah. So yeah, things that are presumed true could turn out to be false, and things that are presumed false could turn out to be true because we never actually speak about it. And if we bring it out to the light, what's
Amen.
true will withstand, what's
Amen.
false will crumble in the light. And
Let the
we talk
truth
about it.
have its day. Truth is truth. It's independent in the sphere.